share with me and get to know me.
Working within it so that you can trust
You got to be able to produce things. And I'll tell you why that production is so important. But before we go there, how do you use those two pieces of equipment? And
Success is not necessarily financial, but success is when you feel fulfilled in what you're doing. And then
to other women, they need to know their value, their worth.
But I believe everything that you put your mind to and you achieve, it's success.
Give us all the stuff.
Okay, I'll answer all 16 of those questions right now. I started in the music business at Sony while I was still...
To the show. My name is Renee Hastings, and I'm your host of Renee Speaks. And y'all, today we are in for a treat. Today's guest for more than 20 years has been helping people break through the obstacles and the barriers that seem to be holding them back. With her high energy, contagious confidence, and natural ability to lead, she's been teaching women how to show up for themselves in big, unapologetic ways. Her clients reclaim their power, live intentionally, and do so on their terms, making their own rules along the way as they go. Y'all, please join me in welcoming Rebecca. Hey.
Hey. Hi. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I am so thrilled that you are here because we need more women taking control of their lives, not being intimidated by their surroundings or their circumstances. And I just can't wait to see how you got to this place in time with this mindset and with this ability to teach other women how to do the same. So go ahead, tell us, give us all the stuff.
Well, we don't have enough time for all that, but I'll give you the bulleted version. So I am actually the oldest of 7. I have 5 younger sisters. They're all in their 30s right now. So I've always been surrounded by a lot of feminine energy. Growing up, I was always in leadership roles in my 20s and my 30s, overseeing teams of women, and just always had that natural kind of mama bear, big sister energy. But it wasn't until about 10 years ago, I ended up moving from East. So I'm from the Grand Rapids area in Michigan, but I, at the time, had been living in Lansing, Michigan, moved to Grand Rapids, ended up switching careers. I'd been in hospitality, ended up in email marketing through a really unique, unique evolution of events in my life. And after I did that, I actually started looking to supplement my income because my position at the time was work from home salary. Ended up landing in the Airbnb industry. And so we were actually hosting people in our house, and it was me as a single mother and then my son. And it was through hosting those people in my home and doing some personal development at the same time that I ended up realizing that life coaching was the thing I was supposed to be doing. And the rest is kind of history.
Wow. That's amazing. So that's quite a journey from email marketing and to hosting an Airbnb and now coaching.
Yeah.
Life experiences. Life can definitely teach you a lot along the way. And then, being the mama bear of 5 younger sisters, I can I totally and I'm envious of your sisters to have someone with such, confidence and authority overseeing and watching over them. How awesome is that?
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun.
Yeah. So how, along this journey, how have you learned to empower women to live unapologetically in their on their own terms. What exactly does that
Yeah.
mean, and how do you do it?
Yeah. So one of the things that is very unique to me, but not just me, is like some of my core values are autonomy and authenticity. So add that on top of being incredibly stubborn as well and having kind of a disregard for status quo, and not disregard as in I don't think there's a place for it, but just how I show up in the world and what I think is inherent to me definitely takes precedent over what I think everybody else thinks I should do or conforming. So being very authentic, very autonomous, somehow I was always able to just retain my own authentic way of being. And I think that's an incredible piece of being able to have that grounded confidence and being able to trust in myself. And so now on the other side of that, with everything that I've navigated in my life, I also have this hyper awareness of why I do things the way that I do. I've sat with myself, I've done a lot of personal development. And so just being able to understand myself, but taking that information not only to continually challenge myself to be a better person, but using my information and processes in order to apply that to other women's lives so that they can do the same thing, but in their own way. So it's not, I have an agenda and I have an expectation for what the outcome is. It's more, this is how I did it. And these are the questions I asked myself. And these are the processes I went through. And we apply those things to you in your life so that you can uncover those pieces about yourself too.
Wow. Wow. And I'm sure that's really revealing when you do that introspection and you really look at, well, this happened to me and I responded in this way. Why did I respond that? What was that trigger in me?
Yeah.
And why? And was this an appropriate response or should it have been something a little bit different? So I can definitely understand and relate that's work. And that's actually, putting in time and effort and to be completely, truly transparent with yourself, through, because sometimes the things that we've gone through with the way we've acted or behaved in the past, we might, in retrospect, have said something a little bit differently, or something like that. Yeah, I speak from a little bit of experience here. But it's good to know, though, that part of that work involves, taking an analysis of your own self to ask those questions. Why did I say that? Why did I act that way? Why did I respond that way? And, are there other questions that you ask yourself as well along that journey as you're, because you can still be authentic and true to yourself, along your growth journey.
Yeah. So there's always questions. That's a huge part of what I do. When it comes to the questions that come up, it's very, very tailored to me meeting the client where they're at. So part of all of this, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is removing that judgment and instead being curious. So not assigning a right or wrong, good or bad. How we feel is how we feel. Would we do something differently? Maybe. But if we don't take the time to validate how we feel and then uncover, like, what would we do differently? Why did we show up that way? And to truly understand ourselves, that's where we can really get caught. And so when you take the time to kind of peel back the layers on everything and discover those things about yourself, all of a sudden you're applying less judgment and also receiving less judgment from the outside and able to instead approach things with a curiosity, which just means that you're constantly learning about yourself, but then you're also opening yourself up to use that information to show up in a way that you feel more aligned with, feels more authentic, and also allows you to trust yourself more.
Right. I love that. And so can you share with us any standout success stories of women that you've worked with who've embraced this and have made it, had an impact?
Transformation. Yeah.
Transformation.
There's a couple of big ones. One of the big ones is in 2020. Obviously, that was a very interesting year for a lot of people. And at the time, I was kind of associated with somebody that was kind of big in our community, is pretty big in our community. We knew of each other, but we didn't have a real close connection. But she had, before that, started this big Facebook community. And at the time in 2020, I think it had like 4,500 or 5,000 women in it. Wow. And so during 2020, in this group that she had created, ended up posting some things, and we just went back and forth and had a really great conversation in the feed on the page. And then we were neighbors as well. So at that point, she actually asked me, do you want to come do a porching, which was just going to sit on her porch during COVID and having a conversation. And so that's what I did. And we did that a couple of times. And during that time, she was actually telling me some of the pain points that she was experiencing, not only as an individual, but also as the owner of 2 businesses as well. And so when she was starting to tell me some of her pain points, I knew that they were things that I could help with. So I ended up raising my hand, putting together a proposal. She signed on the dotted line, and we ended up working together for a year and a half. And so during that time, I was not only the official life coach for that group, that Facebook group that I was talking about, but I was also her personal life coach and worked with both of her small teams for her businesses. And on the other side of that, not only did that end up structuring the Facebook page a little differently, like being more intentional in the language we used and things like that. But I think more importantly, she really started to get confidence around, especially like, I think a lot of times when we think about confidence and being authentic, we think that we have to know what we're doing or that we have to have the answers for something. And I think it's less that and more just showing up and trusting and knowing that we have the power to change our decision at any time if we need to. So seeing that evolve in her, but then also seeing her start understanding herself better, using better language, not only did that create an immense shift in her culture in a positive way, as far as the Facebook group and the businesses, but then on the other side of that, she actually started winning some big awards, both locally and nationally, because she was really stepping into and owning who she was. So that's one of my favorite success stories. And then there's another one where I have a client, we've worked together for a couple of years, more so in the beginning, but on and off still. And she actually ended up within a year and a half of working together, not only being able to navigate an existential crisis in her own life in her 30s, but then on the other side of that, the confidence, the trust, the authenticity of those things turned into quadrupling her business a year and a half later, but then tripling that the next year after that. So that's another big piece too. But then even being able to navigate business in a more authentic way. And that's part of why she became more successful too. It's just that trust, that authenticity, showing up as herself in the world.
Right, right. Because and I love that. And congratulations to you on those incredible success stories. That really is life-changing, not just for them, but for the people that they get to impact as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That they get to cross. And I agree that when we show up as our own self, as our true self, then we're not trying to put on airs for anyone. We're just actually being who we are, and 100% like what you see is what you get. And I love that. I think I've been that way pretty much my whole life. It's been difficult for me to try to be something that I'm not, or be someone that I'm not. So I've never really embraced that at all. Or being a people pleaser wasn't like and I don't know if that's a word that you use in your business or industry, but that was never my story or situation. But I knew lots of people who did, and it was really not a great thing, because I was like, why does that matter so much? I don't understand. Why does that matter so much? And so I just didn't get it. I honestly just didn't get it. But I agree that there are people who definitely have that struggle of, trying to be something for someone instead of being true to themselves and who they are authentically. So thank you for your wisdom and your coaching and being able to show women how to actually do that, how to show up for themselves and not be ashamed of it or feel like they have to apologize for who they are or things like that. Of course, if we treat people badly, we want to apologize, but use that as fuel for where it came from, figuring out where it came from, so that we don't have to put ourselves in a bad position or make others feel badly because of how we're, because of being careless with our words. You understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, and a big thing I love to remind my clients and even just people in general too is a lot of times we can get really in our heads about around what it quote unquote should look like, right? Like how should I show up in the world? What is expected of me? Well, it depends. Like, are those spoken expectations, unspoken expectations? Are they in your head? Did they come from somebody else? Were they modeled somewhere? But it's so easy to overthink that part of like, well, who should I be and how should I show up and how is that going to affect people? But when we actually stop overthinking that and just start to show up more authentically and start trusting ourselves, and like one of the biggest things that does is show us that all those assumptions we've been making actually aren't necessarily the case. But then it's also like the most beautiful permission that we can pass on to other people, that if I can be my most authentic self and it can be okay, you can do the same thing. And I think that's one of my favorite things about all this.
Right, right. So how exactly do you empower women to live unapologetically on their terms? Like, do you give them the language? Do you give them the words, or what? Tell them what they should be on the lookout for triggers when they're not showing up or they're being too apologetic about who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens so many different ways. A big piece of it is definitely language. One of my favorite resources is Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart, just because of the fact, like, in there, she talks about so many different feelings and experiences that we all have as humans. And it was just so incredible when I first listened to it, how she said that of all the emotions and expressions there were, and in general, most people could only name 3. And it was like happy, sad, mad. Like those were the 3. And when we don't have the language for things, not only can we sometimes feel like there must be something wrong with me because I feel this way, but we're also not able to understand how we feel, which means we also can't communicate how we feel, which means we probably can't really shift into what we need or getting our needs met, whether by yourself or somebody else. So that's definitely a huge piece of things, is exploring the language. But the other piece is really starting to challenge being very intentional about what you say, but then also really starting to challenge like the little stories that show up on a day-to-day conversation. So like when somebody says, well, I should, or, you know, I have to, one of the immediate things I'll say is, but who said that? And it's so interesting how something so simple, like we don't stop and ask ourselves that. That's one of the things I talk about sometimes is I ask the questions you don't think to ask yourself. And it's not because there's something wrong with you, but we're in our own minds all of the time. So between levels of awareness and just like how we think, it doesn't really occur to us a lot to question those things for ourselves. So I'll just ask them, who said that? Where did that come from? And then that really starts that curiosity wheel where it's like, wait a minute, where did that come from? Whose is that? Is that mine? Is that theirs? Like, do I want to continue to carry this? Can I put it down? So that's one of the big ways we'll definitely start to sort through that.
I love that. I absolutely love that, because there could be some things or ways that we behave or mindsets that we have that we inherited from our parents or, you know, our mom, or that we just seen always was the case. So it just was always the case that this is what it is. And so this is what I believe because this was always the case, because this is what I saw. This is what I grew up with. Women are supposed to act this way and men are supposed to act that way and girls are supposed to act this way. And so those are just the things that we learned in our environment and things like that. And then they just continue on in us as adults. And those things that we were taught may not have been accurate, or they may not have been right, or they may actually have been just wrong. Let me just
yep, that happens.
Wrong. And so we have to then be the one of, you know, start a different generational thought and mindset so that we don't pass on these negative things that we learned as behavior growing up in our environments. You know, because not everybody has, you know, the Beaver Cleaver life. If anyone on this show knows who Beaver Cleaver is, I'm dating myself. But, you know, with June and Ward and you know, white picket fence and, you know, perfect family, blah, blah, blah. You know, not everyone has that. Most people don't. Right. And so because of that, we have to really fight to combat those negative things that we may have grown up around or grown up believing, or these self-inflicted inner vows that we make for ourselves based on growing up in an environment that may have been dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know?
dysfunctional, but it was our normal because that's what we were used to. So that's where a lot of that comes from. Yeah.
Right? Yes, exactly. Exactly. So it reminds me, when I met my husband comes from almost like a beaver cleaver house. I did not.
Okay.
Mine was like the exact opposite. And we were definitely the partying, hard drinking, hard partying, out there, wilding out kind of family environment that I grew up in. And he said to me, well, how come you do this? I'm like, well, because everybody does this, because in my mind, I'm like, everyone parties on Friday night because it's Friday. You know. And
you're like, I don't understand the question.
why are you asking me this? Isn't it obvious? But these are things that, we definitely come from different places in terms of what our growing up experiences were like, and, what was normal. And to me, this was just a part of life. This is just normal. This is just how you behave on a Friday night. But, come to find out that not so much, more balance. And anyways, we, over the years I've learned so much from him, and he's learned so much from me, and we balance each other out really, really well. But it was interesting to when I did my own self-introspection of finding out, why did I think this was normal? Well, it was normal because this is what I grew up in. But then it took someone else from the outside saying, things can be different.
Exactly.
Be different.
Yep.
So it was really great. So confidence is central to your work. How can women build and maintain confidence and trust themselves?
Yeah. So this is actually definitely one of my favorite things to talk about. Obviously, it's core of what I do, but I've actually, through my own self-exploration and information that I've digested and shared and just working with my clients, built this framework of being able to go from like kind of point A to point Z when it comes to building that confidence, which confidence isn't even the last rung on the ladder. Authenticity is, but confidence is the one right before that. So I talk about how, like, we've all heard about boundaries, how to set boundaries. Boundaries are the difference between me and you, my preference versus yours, where you end and I begin. And it is all of those things, but more importantly, it's what allows us to show up in our integrity. And so our integrity is the happiest version of myself, the way I honor myself the most, understanding how I show up and the things that influence that, and really being able to set boundaries for myself and with others that actually keep me in my integrity. And so when you're able to do that, and we do a lot of work behind figuring out what those things are and what that looks like as far as the boundary pieces. But once we start doing that, what that really does is it helps you realize that you can trust yourself. So I think a lot of times we really struggle with that confidence piece because we feel like we're at the mercy of our life or experiences or other people in our circles, when we can really start to set those boundaries that keep us in our integrity, that actually allows us to believe that we can trust ourselves to keep ourselves safe. And then when you start to do that more consistently, that's what starts to really build the grounded confidence. Because one of the other big things that I learned from Brené Brown was the difference between self-esteem and grounded confidence is literally your inner critic. So it's how much weight, how much time you actually give that voice, and whether or not you allow it to chip away at your grounded confidence, or whether you diminish it, take the mic away, and actually lean into that confidence. So when you can trust yourself more and more and more, that leads to more confidence. When you can more confidently show up into the world more often, that helps you show up more authentically, because then you're less worried about people pleasing and FOMO and doing what everybody else thinks you could do. Trust yourself to keep yourself safe, but you're also confident in who you are too.
Right. That's fantastic. Yeah, we love Brené Brown. We've heard her name a few times over the past few weeks. And yeah, she's just so amazing. And one of the book that was mentioned earlier today was Dare to Lead. And that's another really great one. But yeah, lots of really, really great advice, and especially about talking back to that inner critic. Because the inner critic is going to tell you you're not enough. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not educated enough. You're not thin enough. You're not whatever, you know. And when we can talk back to that and say, I am good enough. I am pretty enough. I am smart enough. And, you know, then that's when, like you said, our confidence can begin to get built and get stronger. And we can be prepared to make a response to anyone who questions us. You know what I mean? And why,
including ourselves. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Love it. Love that so much. So what's your definition of a confident, intentional life?
Confident means to me, like having a confident, intentional life is understanding who you are, accepting that, leaning into it, and showing up, just honoring yourself. Not, I mean, you can do things for other people, but as long as it comes from you first, like if it serves your best self, I don't like saying best self anymore, but your happiest self, your most authentic self. And the confidence is a key part of that, is the trust. I trust myself. I trust the process. I don't have to control all the things. I don't have to know all the things. Like, it's so easy for us to just automatically want to do that. And a lot of us do. But when we can really start to let go of that control and that need to know and start to trust everything, including ourselves, that's what really allows us to show up and thrive, I think.
Right. There's so many things that are out here in the news that, you know, people are spewing. You know, especially, and I actually hate election years, and this is not a political conversation at all.
Yeah.
But I don't even listen to the news. I don't watch the news. That actually drives my husband crazy. That I
I'm same. I'm with you.
But when I do sit down in front of the television, even for just a few minutes, and I'm like listening to all of this, you know, people
Noise.
saying these things, and I'm just like, do they honestly believe that? Do other people honestly believe them? Like, what in the world is going on here? It's like, I just can't even. And so I turn it off. And I end up going to listen to a podcast or watch a video that I choose what I want to fill my ears with, what I want to fill my eyes with, and, you know, fill my spirit with, you know, because all of that is just too much. It's too much.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Rebecca, what advice do you have for those that are hesitant to take control of their lives? And why do you think people hesitate?
It's scary, right? Like, being the leader doesn't mean you know what you're doing. It just means you go first. And that's scary, especially if you're in families or circles of friends or in business spaces where, like, it's human nature to kind of want everybody to kind of be at the same level. So when somebody's audacious enough or bold enough to actually start challenging who they are, what's normal in those spaces, like, that's scary. You're kind of out there on your own unless you're already surrounded with other people doing similar things. So first of all, acknowledging that it is going to be scary, that it is a process and it's a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it. But then also to just give yourself a ton of grace, judge less, be curious more, let that understanding really inform how you show up and how you want to show up in the future. And to know that there's going to be pushback. Like, there's never not pushback in some capacity, even with yourself sometimes. So it's not this linear process. It's very much, have you ever heard of a Newton's cradle? It's a tabletop game that actually has, like, the balls that are suspended on it, and then you pull one back and it drops and it hits the rest of them, and then it swings back again, and then it keeps going back and forth and back and forth.
I didn't realize that ball thing on the table had a name.
Newton's cradle. Yeah.
All right.
So I love talking about that, especially when it comes to boundaries and just the process of life in general. Like, we can forget so often, especially in our culture. It's that instant gratification. It's the quick fix. It's the check off the box. But most things are a process. And so when we can start removing our expectations of this very linear navigation of something, a lot like with the Newton's cradle. Like somebody's going to pull a boundary back and drop it. That's usually us, right? Or the trend or the challenge or whatever it is. And then that goes back into the other, whoever that is on the other side, whether it's work or a partner or something. And then they push back because it's not what we are familiar with. So it's not a right or wrong thing again. But when they push it back, it's our job to reinforce it. So then we push it back again. But just like the Newton's cradle, like eventually there's less pushback, and we're normalizing whatever that process is or whatever it is that we're trying to do. And eventually we end up finding ourselves grounded in that new center. So I think that's another part too, is just remove your expectations of what this looks like. Trust yourself to make the right decision. Embolden yourself to actually be the one that reinforces what it is that you're trying to be more intentional about, and invite others to come with you.
Mhm. Wow, I love that. I love that. So, so as you, this advice is so good. Just because there's so many people, like we were talking about earlier, who are afraid, who don't feel confident in their ability to stand up for themselves, because whether or not it's because they don't trust themselves or they lack their own, level of confidence. So I love how you just kind of reassure them that it's okay. They're worthy of having a voice, and they matter. They need to know that they matter. And these tips and tricks that you're giving really help us, even as business owners, or whether we're, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, corporate workers, doesn't matter. Whatever situation we're in, we need to understand our value and our worth. And when we do that, then we can stand up and we can come and present in a confident manner what we have to say. Because what we have to say, I think if we look at what we have to say as being a gift to other people, then that perspective changes things. It changes our delivery, and it changes how we're impacted by the recipients who may or may not receive what we have to say. That makes sense?
And oh, absolutely. And it ties in with one of the things I say to my clients most, which is be kind to my friend. Because a lot of times we can get so caught up in overthinking and analyzing and judging like what we should or shouldn't do or how we show up. And it can be hard to extend ourselves, especially if it's something we're just starting, extend ourselves self-compassion and grace. And so to be able to, it's kind of a hack, you're still doing it for somebody else, but you're doing it to yourself. And actually, after a certain time, you actually start doing it for yourself. But that's one of my favorite things to say is be kind to my friend, because it has the same outcome. And eventually you'll get there. But until you're there, do it for somebody.
Right, exactly. And you should be your own best friend, right?
Yeah.
So that definitely, you can see how that would work for sure, as a giver and a receiver. Yeah, for sure. So, Rebecca, do you have any ongoing projects or resources for listeners on their journey toward self-empowerment?
Absolutely. So you can find me anywhere. LinkedIn and Facebook, everything's under Maria Venus, my website too. I actually do have a standing free challenge that's on my website. And that's actually something that helps you build what I call an internal compass. For the internal compass, that's actually a look at what your core values are, 2 to 3 top core values, what your emotional goal is. So paying attention to how you want to feel, and then really taking a look at that future version of yourself, that happiest version of yourself, and starting to put together the pieces of her so you can make decisions from her angle versus your current angle and based on past experience. So that free challenge is on my website. And then I'm actually taking on year-long clients too. So if you're interested in that, you can also find that on my website.
Awesome. And we have your website up here. It's a beautiful website.
Thank you.
Build your internal compass. So yeah, love that. Love that. And I hope that lots of the listeners of the show will sign up, will take advantage of the challenge, and, start digging in deep. To finding out who they are, what their values are, because there's so much noise out there trying to dictate to us what our values should be, those sorts of things, and should actually Should reminds me of a word that my mom used to hate. And the phrase she used to hate was supposed to. Supposed to was like trigger words for my mom.
Yeah.
And I think it became trigger words for me growing up. And because it just immediately just brought something up. And I was like, supposed to, like, who says?
Said who? Yeah.
Right? Like, and what do they have to do with me? I love it. I mean, but it's just having this conversation just kind of brings back those memories of, and just it's so true that we are all products of our environment, but we can take control of where we are today. And if we don't like where we are today, we have the power to make change and be different and have different outcomes. Because if we want something different in life, we have to do different things. We can't keep doing what we've been doing.
Yep, you said it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rebecca, I know you shared with us that we can reach you on all the socials, Marie of Venus. We got your website. Do you have any final words to share, advice or tips or tricks for our audience before we head out?
Well, I already gave you one of them, be kind to my friend. But the other one that I always love to talk about too is, a lot of times, and we've all heard this in the past or said it even, what did I do to deserve this? So I love to reframe that and cross out deserve, and what we actually put as receive. So when we talk about receiving the good things, really opening ourselves up and allowing that definitely highlights that. But then on the other end, when there are things that are more challenging that we're navigating, really taking a look at what boundaries could be in place. Where am I compromising myself? Where am I compromising my integrity? And recognizing again that you still have choice to change that if you want to moving forward. So just what did I do to deserve this? But what did I do to receive this? And then using that to empower yourself.
Oh, that is so good. That is so good. And it's all in the framing. I like how you, not what did I do to deserve this, but what did I do to receive this? Because everything that happens to me, everything that happens in life happens for a reason. And that reason, it could be to shape you, to help you think about doing things differently, help you see things from other people's perspectives, or to kind of build your character. Different things happen for different reasons, but nothing should be wasted. We don't want to waste any experience. And when we can frame it like, what did I do to receive this? It helps us look at it in a more positive light and a positive spin toward more personal growth opportunities, as opposed to something negative that's being done to me.
Exactly.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for all of your words of wisdom. It has truly been an honor and a privilege to have you here on this show. You were made for something great, so go and be awesome.
Oh, thank you so much.